Now, yeah, hi everyone. This is a conversation community Zoom session, and today we have Milo, Dodds, Mauriello, and Michael Linton, and myself, John Kellden, joining. We're going to go on for about around an hour and covering knowledge recipes, reusable learning objects, cards and patterns, and a few other things related to that. Milo has prepared some notes we will show shortly. Mauriello is a game designer, among all the other hats he wears. Michael Linton has done lots of things to do with mutual credit and local currencies, and how those could sort of apply in a good way to digital platforms and what we do on those. And I'm doing conversation community, which is 4,000 people trying to figure out what digital conversations are. So next, Joe, you could go next, right?
Sure. So am I meant to introduce myself, or do I want to adjust the question?
No, I mean just a kind of 1 minute, all you.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So as John mentioned, game design. Also, I've been plying my trade as a usability researcher, UX researcher for the past 8 to 10 years. So I have that background as well, of just being observant and trying analytical. And so these things combine, I think, quite well into a situation where, the work that John has been doing with the conversation community, sort of observing the patterns that are emerging and trying to understand how we can make systems and feedback loops to just encourage John's one rule, which I really appreciate as a game designer: add considerable and considerate comments to other people's posts. I just think that's wonderful, just single kind of encapsulation of what we can do to be sort of mindful of each other and mindful of the way that we speak to one another, and leveraging that towards working together. So I think that pretty much sums up my minute. Passing on the mic.
Well, Michael, so I'll take the mic. I've been stuck on money for 30 years since we ran out of it and came up with our own. The LET system in the early 80s, community currencies. And it grabbed me. I've been totally unable to detach myself from the process since then. Basically, that if a gift is not acknowledged, it sort of dies. It sort of sits on the corner. So if Joe does something for me and I don't acknowledge it, then Joe's less likely to do it again. So the pattern of, and I was listening to that John's rule number 1, to acknowledge, to make a positive comment. I was thinking, well, what's that? Nudge it forward, knock it forward, pat it forward. You pat on the back. You give a pat on the back to the guy who posted, and the pat on the back is the acknowledgement that makes the gift circulate. So anyway, that's my gig. Is I think money is a commons if we make it so. We can reflect that free speech is something that we either have or don't notice. And if we have it, well, if we have free speech, we have essentially free money. Now, that doesn't mean it's cheap. Like you got to work for it. It's no free rides, but free in the sense of free speech. So that's my world. Thank you.
Milo?
Cool. Hi, my name's Milo Dodds. I've been sort of in the tech field for, a little over 20 years. I started off supporting manufacturing, which is kind of my background. My family, we're a family of injection molders, and we make lots and lots of medical parts and all sorts of other types of parts. I got into e-learning when it was very early. I was working at Cisco at the time, and really kind of got involved in education and corporate education. Became an instructional designer, and I still currently work as an instructional designer. I do all sorts of different aspects and roles. I've been involved in web development, metrics, quality management. I've done some ISO 9001 certification, and really interested in, total quality management, process improvement, looking at where we can make a difference around people's performance. I do a lot of study around human performance technology. So I really try to take those things and see how I can help people, change their behaviors, do things in a better way, really try to focus on less is more, and really try to boil the content down that people need to learn down to making it the easiest, most consumable type of material. So I really look for simplicity and elegance in the designs that I work on. And I've done a lot of stuff. And recently I left Apple. I was there for about a year and a half working on financial training. But right now I'm a consultant contractor, and I'm actually back at Cisco working in supply chain operations. So it's kind of my corporate educational background. And happen to be looking at, by the way, I was looking at, and I'll show this in the notes. I'll cover that later, how I got involved in the currency and knowledge and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, Milo, feel free to just go right into your notes if you want.
Sure. By the way, is there a way to screen share with this app or not?
It should be
Is that possible?
Yeah, it should be.
I'm just not that familiar with this. It's the first time I'm using Zoom.
The bottom button in the very middle is share. It's like a box with an arrow pointing up. Might be green or blue.
Okay. I don't see it. I just have video mute. I just have some white buttons. Yeah, I don't see anything with share.
It should be invite, participant, share, chat. If you kind of move around a bit at the bottom of the screen.
Yeah, I see chat. Let's see what else. Just disable video.
To the left of chat.
Maybe widen the screen.
Participants.
Between participants and chat, there should be a share.
I don't have a share, guys.
This may be something to do with your sign on. Why don't you sign out of your computer one and just rejoin and see if it boots up. We'll listen to you in the meantime. But that would probably, if there's a problem, that would.
Yeah.
Okay, so sign out on the computer and rejoin. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, let's.
And now we all talk about him for 2 minutes while that happens.
Yeah, I mean, this is. Speaking of getting all these tools and technologies to work really well together with humans, right? I mean, Zoom has probably done thousands of man hours to sort of have everything work as smoothly as possible. And us poor normal users are still kind of having a bit of trouble. Oh, there we go, right, already.
That was one of the seamless transitions, though, from problems to up and running. I got to give them credit.
I always love when that happens. It just starts to work, right?
Yeah.
Milo, you have the screen, I think, so you could just talk us through it.
Yeah, you could bring your sound up on your phone again. Both your phone and your computer are shown as participating.
Milo is still himself muted, I think. If you can hear that. Just not.
Okay, guys.
Hooray.
There we are.
Okay,
Hi.
so apparently it dropped my phone audio. Okay, so now I'm back on the computer. Okay, so here's what's going on as to how this sort of concept came to me. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Pinterest. It's a website that allows you to collect it's almost like trading cards. And what they are, they're like these little bits of knowledge or information. And it's really quite interesting. It really kind of gets you back to when you were a kid and you were either collecting, like, for example, I used to collect Star Wars cards, and a lot of kids would collect baseball cards. And what's really cool about this website is that you can sort of create a bunch of different groupings around your interest, your hobbies, the things that you're fascinated with. And so I was fascinated with cooking and gardening and scouting and all of these different topics. And I started collecting these little, almost like cards. They call them pins. And what's really fascinating about this is that it gives you information about, perhaps it's a recipe, perhaps it shows you how to do something, but it's a chunk of information that's probably no more than 5 minutes long. And usually what it does is it links you to some sort of website that gives you additional information. So it kind of has a shiny front appearance to it, like a baseball card or some sort of collector's card. And then from there, you go into it further. So you see something, it flashes your interest, attracts you to it. You say, save it to my folder. You specify where you want to save it. And then you sort of basically consume it at that point. Or save it for later. Like, hey, I'm going to put it in my pocket. I'm going to put it in my bag. Then I'll come back to it later. And I've got many of those that I've collected. So just sort of the other thing is that they've hit upon something with this way of distributing information. It's much like collecting cards, but I also put down that this isn't a new concept, because people have been collecting things and trading things with each other for pretty much all of the existence of our existence, even going back to obsidian that was traded and collected for making arrowheads and things. So let me go down a little bit further here. Okay. Now I got to figure out how to make this thing slide. Okay. There we go. Okay. So one of the questions I started thinking about was what does the word knowledge mean? And I realized that we may not necessarily be talking about the same thing, but there is a sort of a hierarchy about data, information, knowledge, understanding, and wisdom. And knowledge is sort of right in the middle of this continuum, and is known as the data, information, knowledge, understanding, wisdom continuum. It's quite a long title, but it gives you kind of an idea that there is something special about knowledge, but it goes further. And I think most of us would like to get to understanding and wisdom along this continuum, but we first have to start out with data and information. And I think a lot of this has to do with what I said earlier about consumption. It's information for the most part until we do something with it. We have to bring it into our minds. We have to sort of grasp and reason and put things and connect it properly in our brains before it becomes knowledge. And then we have to go further before we truly understand it, which, by the way, is a very subjective term from an instructional design perspective. And then as we apply it in our lives and we gain experience around that knowledge and that understanding, can we ever get to the point that it becomes wisdom? So just wanted to kind of cover that aspect of it. And then the next part is I started looking at this concept of knowledge as a currency. And some interesting things about currency is, what is currency? So I went out and looked at, and I got some information about what are the different attributes of currency. And I think Michael mentioned something earlier about it sort of being acceptable or what's accepted. And that's one of the things, like, why is it we don't call knowledge currency, is because it's not agreed upon that knowledge is a currency. There are certain rules that go around accepting. And obviously currency, the history of currency has changed. You know, we used to trade shells and obsidian with each other. And then later on it became gold and silver, and these different precious materials became the means by which we traded currency. But currency has other aspects to it. It has to be agreed upon ahead of time as to what it is, what its value is, how portable is it, how durable is it, is the value the same for each sort of unit of currency? Can it be divided? Can it be turned into a coin? Which, by the way, this malleability may not necessarily be a requirement anymore, because now we're seeing virtual currencies and bitcoins and, you know, different means by which we trade. Cognizability is the ability to recognize that, hey, that's currency, that is a value, that's something that I want. And then the other aspect of it is the stability of its value. And we talk about in economics the money supply and you know, controlling the volume of that currency so that we can deal with inflation and deflation and different aspects of it. So I have notes on this side here that talks about where knowledge and currency sort of intersect each other, and where knowledge falls short of the different attributes of currency. So I pulled this information from different sources, and I tried to give those sources below. But basically, it's pretty general concepts around, you know, what is currency and where knowledge falls short. And there's been some other discussions about this whole concept. There was a Quora discussion that's quite good that talks about, and it the consensus was pretty much that, unfortunately, knowledge is not that close to what we're currently using for currency. And that was sort of the general consensus of the top comments that were made and the research that people were doing. But I still feel that there's something about the sort of ability to trade knowledge, the ability to have these sort of nuggets, or what we call reusable learning objects. And back about 15 years ago or so, back in 1990, well, it's, yeah, a little more than 15 years ago, I guess closer to 20 years ago, the company that I was working at, we were working a lot around reusable learning objects and reusable information objects, what we call RLO and RIO. And this was research that was done by Ruth Clark, Chuck Barrett, and a bunch of folks at Cisco. And they were really looking at how to chunk knowledge down into smaller pieces. There is a link on here to the research that they did, and they went beyond the company. They were really getting much more academic about this RLO, RIO. And I know that the university, I think San Diego, was also involved heavily with doing some of this work. But anyways, I really sort of wanted to talk about the aspect of, I feel like there's something here around how we can trade knowledge. It might be more of a bartering than it might be as of a currency. But I think there is something to be said that maybe currency could change and has a knowledge aspect to it. It just feels like there's something there that hasn't been uncovered yet. And that's kind of where I wanted to bring this conversation and talk about it. So if you guys want to, interact at this point, this is what I've put together so far. I still was working around the knowledge pins and RLO, RIO, RLO strategy. So
thanks, Milo. This is really great stuff to dive into. And mindful of, I think Joe wants to head out in a bit. Joe, you could.
Oh yeah, so I
actually
have I have the okay to stick around until 7:30, so I have a bit more time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll weigh in here. So, Michael, I was listening to the other Zoom conversation you guys recorded, and I see some similarities to like to the mutual credit systems and that sort of thing, where it's more of a measure than a quantity, and that really fascinates me. I also see a lot of synergy with stuff John and I have worked on previously. So I've been sort of working with John on and off for the past year or so, on and off only because I have a full-time job and kids. So, but we're trying a lot of stuff kind of has around cards and kind of encapsulating a bit of knowledge in the card and then having a way to kind of extend it and go deeper. And so that's really exciting, seeing like these ideas popping up in somebody else's mind too, apart from what we were thinking. But I think you're onto something there with the idea of like having that shiny surface. Yes, and then like there's this affinity thing. Like you like Star Wars cards, maybe you like Luke Skywalker, so you're looking for his cards. You know, in the knowledge sense, maybe I'm looking for information about game systems, and so you know, here's a whole collection of cards on game systems. Then I can sort of collect them, and then in another mode, actually flip through them and dig through them and look at them. So I really, yeah, that resonates with me a lot with what we just said. And as far as reusable learning objects and reusable information objects, those are fascinating concepts that I haven't heard of before, but I will definitely look into.
Okay. Michael, you want to chime in as well?
Yeah, there's this concept in money generally called the double spending. The idea is if you use a dollar bill over there, you shouldn't be able to use it over there and there and there and as well. You know, it's one time, one shot, which was the reason why monies have historically been things like precious metal. So it couldn't be replicated so easily. Now, in contrast, of course, the value of information is that it is replicable, and the information you have is not diminished by passing it on to me. Now, one of the issues here, I think, is that but we know that the information is valuable. You see, so we feel the value of Joe sends me something, or Milo gets something from John, and there is a benefit. A value has transferred from one to the other, just in the same way as I get a hat from the store on the corner. Something has moved. Now, the thing is that the thing that moves is matched by the symbol, the money, the measure, the recognition, the acknowledgement, the pat on the back, the whatever it is. And we're so addicted to having both of those. I want the money and I want the hat, you see. So when there's a hat money transfer, I tend to lose the awareness that the hat went one way, the money went the other. And they're two different modalities, two different things. So I'm totally up for the idea of transferable information in components, in modules, in being able to track how an idea moves through a network. This card came from Milo, it went to Joe, Joe passed it on. You know, that's valuable stuff, a meta information set about the information. But the information to be money has to revert back to that obscenity called the blockchain or something like that. It has to pretend it is uncopyable. I mean, the whole irony of the blockchain bullshit and, in fact, the commercialization of the internet is turning something which is a copying device. The internet is a copying device. It makes that available here, there, and everywhere else. Oh no, close it down, block it off, enclose it, charge it, you know, paywalls, and so on and so forth. So we've got to stay the right side of these considerations. Recognize the value of information in modules, components, cards, packages, whatever. But I'm really nervous about thinking of information as money. For a start, it makes me reluctant to pass it on. Oh, you know, maybe I'll get more for this round the corner or something. So One of the theories of money from a guy called Silvio Giselle, in the early part of the 1900s, was that conventional money wasn't the enabler, it was the disabler of exchange. Because we needed to keep it, we were reluctant to pass it on. So money served as the holder back from action. And indeed, one of the terms that's been used for money that I've really enjoyed is, it is frozen desire, deferred gratification.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's a petrified image of, one day I'll have fun. Ah, my precious, that sort of stuff. And we just get ourselves completely inverted around these abstractions and find ourselves being run around by our nose. So sorry, that was an
No, those are great reflections. And I was just kind of thinking of when you mentioned the copying machine, then I should probably sort of commit to recorded memory here that I think Kevin Kelly outlined 8 principles to do with the web and the internet as a copying machine. The nice thing with those 8 principles is he then sort of went on in the presentation and say, here's a couple of hints how you can sort of take those sort of what might be possible models sort of beyond free. I think the presentation might be called, I will go look for it and add it as an annotation to this video. And I think this is where...
Can I just put in a short one here? I met Kevin Kelly in the mid-'80s, and on the conversation of information needs to be free and so on and so forth, we diverged on money, principally because he said, well, that's copyable, so it can't be money. Because mutual credit is a money which can be shared around. The information of the money can be shared.
Yeah.
It's not the money isn't shared, but the information can be.
Yeah.
So he was averse to that, a sort of a knee-jerk reaction. And this was a sort of a conversation at the side of the stage at a presentation he was making. So I'm not going to hold him to it, but I just keep wishing if he'd understood what I was trying to say in 1986.
Yeah. I mean, speaking of which, I last year spoke with Nora Bateson, the daughter of Gregory Bateson, and she has coined a word. It's called symmathecy, and that's basically a system seen with and immersed in and understood as in the context of mutuality and learning. And when I met her, we met a couple of years ago, and when she first introduced me to that word, it just kind of felt like a seismic unlearning shift in my mind. And I had to just tell her straight up, almost the very first thing I said to her, that, Nora, you know that my brain is now telling me that, half of stuff I thought I had hoarded in my big brain of mine and as useful knowledge, I probably need to chuck that out. Right? And she just laughed straight from the heart. Right? And this is where these things now later on, this was just kind of me I'm going to say these things, right? And then now later on, I realized that would probably be a pretty wise thing to say to her, because we have sort of kept in conversation ever since, because she thought it was really funny, straight from the heart, and so on. And it kind of outlines how just coining a new word could suddenly enable us to see things in new ways. And even though Kevin Kelly might not have sort of seen the full light in terms of beyond free, it's still an intriguing concept, right? Because we're living inside Facebook lots of the time when we're kind of lured into, I started the whole thing and hacked a conversation meeting inside Facebook because that's where everyone else was. So I had to. I don't really personally like the whole thing. Lots of reasons. They're kind of using us humans as reusable learning objects, right? And squeezing every last dime out of our pockets to us clicking the like button, which feeds Mark Zuckerberg and no one else. These days, the shareholders, right? Because he conned them as well. But what if we use something similar to this machine, but not slapping kind of an ad model on top of it, but rather mutual credit, platform co-op, a DAO, different graphs, because what we have now is kind of pretend social graphs, which is kind of obviously a lie, because I don't have 5,000 friends. but I have on Facebook, so it's kind of I'm pretending. And just a couple of days ago, Facebook, in its infinite wisdom, their algorithms decided to disappear 1,200 of the 5,200 conversation committee members without prior warning. Then I had to sort of go excavate, and yes, sure, they were in an invite list that sort of just appeared left of center. So now I have kind of the strange sensation of having kind of like you are members in good credit, right? That's the word again, right? Mutual credit if we want to. And we have also kind of half members, and how to deal with those, right? Should I just sort of harass them again and sort of try to sort of lure them into the fold? So this is where algorithms aren't really serving us, right? So if we would have algorithms built on Milo's idea of actually people wanting to collect stuff, right, for their own benefit and possibly share them, and then there's for other benefits, right? So benefit might be really, really good word, kind of possibly the key takeaway of this whole session. But then if we then look at, can we add things like dynamic tokenization? Can we add digital curation? I mean, it's not that far-fetched. If you have collections, if there's really great collections, someone probably spend some heartfelt time and attention to curating those collections, right? So that could be a way for them to actually have a measurable value. They were hard to sort of come by in the first place, right? So, and it could be anything, but there's a leap from the metaphors of collecting stuff. I really love your example of the obsidian, right? Because everyone realized then that, hey, I can make a spear or a knife or something. I can skin my game, and there's food on the table. So obviously there's value, right? And out of sort of necessity, they had to sort of figure out how to sort of barter and trade those, right? Because if you happen to have more than your fair share of obsidian, and if you were a decent human being, you barter those with, and someone else gave you something in return. So, and here we are, more than 1 billion human beings inside these walled digital gardens like Facebook and whatnot. And we are not doing that. We are kind of trying to, I mean, I did the research in terms of collectibles and genres. 98% of all the digital content inside proprietary platforms are cat gifts, selfies, content marketing, and mostly uninformed opinion. So those are the sort of the 4 collectibles that dominate our discourse. And it's kind of strange. It's kind of like the human collective intelligence has an autoimmune reaction to the bastardry going on from the proprietors. Right? So we're just doing stupid stunts to just give the middle finger, almost like in a digital sense, to the proprietary digital landlords, right? But what if we do other collectibles than those 4 in terms of genres, right? What if we do digital conversation, digital collaboration? And there's another Zoom just ready yesterday where I talked with Joachim Straw.
Yeah.
He's a German guy, but has lived in New York forever. And he's designed a thing called social ledger. So social ledger could then be sort of the scaffolding, supporting structure upon which we could add reusable collectibles. I won't go further into social ledger. Have a go, and I can send links. But here's a way we could actually help others just building further on what unique collections they have in their minds and heart, right? And then we'll figure out how to barter, how to share. But I think we need a couple of more Zoom sessions in terms of the whole tokenization thing. The tokenization thing is basically just how to put currencies sort of at some working scale from 2 people, which is kind of the smallest possibly, right, in the barter. I give you something and you give me something in return. So there's probably you need at least 2. Kind of difficult to, I mean, you could technically say in a transaction you could do myself, but kind of in a normal economic sense, it's 2 and more, right? But then at larger scales, this becomes susceptible, and sort of people are tempted to game this, right? So Facebook, yeah, I game this because I wanted to have 5,000 friends, and I can sort of have them as my loyal minions, right? And then so does everyone else, and then there's a battle of attention. Attention is one of the last things I wanted to cram in here. Because if we can figure out how to reconvivialize attention, then we're kind of halfway there towards actually doing sort of the pro bono work necessary to kickstart mutual credits, alternative currencies, inside sort of platforms of our own homesteading. And so if I hear people saying we need users, then I'm just always replying, no, I'm really sorry you said that, because that we are not, right? I'm not doing dopamine crack inside Facebook, right? That's not me, right? Even though I have to endure people who are doing that, right? But that doesn't automatically, if there's crackheads around, that doesn't automatically make me cracky, right? As long as I have a choice. Right? So, but the drug metaphor is also important because we need to be mindful of that some possibly initially decent humans, like the orange zombie clown with nuclear launch codes that currently poses as the POTUS in America, right? Or Bolsonaro in Brazil, they might not have been born bastards, right? Who knows, right? Possibly not. Or Mark Zuckerberg, he was possibly not born a bastard, but he turned into one, right? So we need to sort of be very careful about what currencies we put in place. So, and this is where Yo has, and me, and does some great work in terms of game design, right? Can we do things in a platform that are eminently gameable and tweakable and moddable? So you can mod and tweak and edit to your heart's desire, create your own collections, and they turn into value, and you can barter, and you can basically thrive, enjoying the platform and network effects, but without turning you into bastard if you sort of get too good at gaming. Yeah, sure. Yeah, great.
Yeah, if I may insert here, the pattern of flow that is induced by such currencies and activities is really very critical. For instance, you referred to the barter as a sort of an elemental component of a trading community or whatever. And although it is, you know, I do something with Joe, Joe does something with me, you guys get nothing to do with it. It's a collapsed situation. The gift I gave Joe is reflected with a gift Joe gives to me. Nothing moves on in another direction. So this was highlighted with the pay it back, pay it forward distinction that ran up about 10 years ago with that movie and so on. And the thing about pay it back is that the pattern stops between the two players, which is why barter is a very unfruitful activity. It's manageable, but it's a hell, and it's very difficult to keep in balance and persist. Whereas pay it forward says, oh, I got something from Joe, I'll do something for John. I'll pass the gift onwards. I'll be equally generous. Pay it forward is great because it moves things onwards, but it has no edges. It's a dissipative system. It doesn't refeed back to itself. And the thing that makes a mutual credit system work is the enclosure and resonance. But I do something for Joe, Joe does something with Milo, Milo does something with John, you know, and we just get this bouncing around inside a net of connected agents. And it's this closure that creates the resonance and the reciprocity and the vitality. If we don't have edges, then the gift can be passed on and distributed, and that's great, but the quality of monetization is very, very different. So I think we need to make these clear distinctions between information we wish to swap carefully between secured persons, the bartering sort of model, keep it quiet, don't tell everybody. The pay it forward, where you publish it and everybody gets to see it. You know, that's what the information wants to be free world is about. And the patterning of a money that is enclosed in its own organism, if you like, it's its own lifeblood. That's wrong, but it's enclosed and resonant because of its pattern. We've got to keep looking at the patterns of events that are caused by our actions. And the patterns are the things we see so little of. We know what we did. We don't know what the downstream consequences were at all. So patterns.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, several concepts have been kind of like, I keep seeing these touch points coming back to some of the things that I graphed in terms of like the attributes of currency. Like, John, you mentioned earlier about these sort of landlords or these people that are establishing the rules. You know, the Facebook is really dealing with, I look at it this way, they're dealing with stuff that's not necessarily knowledge. They're looking at data and information. There's a lot of information that's being, and it's not necessarily good information, but there's a lot of information that's on Facebook that's just like, you know, it's like a fire hydrant of stuff that's happening, and they're controlling how that, I guess you could call it currency, but they're controlling how that currency is coming to us and how we're relating to that currency. But they're not necessarily dealing with knowledge and wisdom and understanding. None of that is part of the equation of what's going on in Facebook. So I kind of feel it this way. They're kind of like brokers of useless information for the most part. That's what they're brokering. And we're spending our time, because really time is, as they say, time is our most valuable commodity. It's our time, it's our energy, it's our focus. What do we do with that time while we're alive? That's what we're spending our time and our energy and our life force on things. And the other thing that I found interesting was when we use currency, I think it's Michael, right? Michael, you mentioned earlier about how there's this, like, you purchase something and there's this sort of like a newness to it. And it's like you go and you buy something, but it's almost like you're starting over. Like currency has this thing that says, oh, you got to buy something, but it has to be, you're buying something that's new. Versus with knowledge, I look at it this way. It's like taking what we have in our heads and trying to improve upon it, make it a little better. I know it's the law of diminishing returns, but knowledge is about, you know, getting further and further and further and further, you know, more knowledgeable about something. And currency sort of puts you back into this, let's throw the baby out with the bathwater and start new again. Whereas if we had something that was better than currency, that improved our knowledge and took us further and further and further down the road, that would be, I almost look at it this way. It's like, where is currency falling short with what we're doing? And where is it that knowledge could take us further and get us to the point where, and it's almost like the more knowledge you have, the less things you need to have. It refines what you know. And it's like with survival. If you have a lot of knowledge about how to survive, you don't need a giant backpack full of stuff to survive, because you know how to take what's in front of you and do something with it, as opposed to, oh my gosh, I need another pocket knife, or I need a this, or I need a that. I guess that's where I'm kind of going with this, sort of like, knowledge can be better than currency if you know enough stuff in the right way, whereas currency just kind of, I don't know, kind of
Absolutely. No, yeah. I agree with what you're saying. And I see that. I see, you know, right now, and I've talked to John about this to sort of sum up what I'm hearing here. I talked to John about this, the idea that, you know, the current sort of way that we think about money and currency, it's a very divisive thing. It's like it's not about us working together. It's about me getting what I need from you so I can go over here and do my thing over here with getting the new thing, consuming, et cetera, et cetera. But I see, you know, the idea of knowledge is credit, or this idea of, you know, creating edges, you know, feedback, feed forward. What if it was sort of overlaid interests that sort of created those edges? And so it wasn't so much that we're keeping this knowledge to ourselves. It's that we're the ones that want to know more about this. Because we're interested in this stuff together. So we share this between us. It creates an edge. The more that folks pass this knowledge between each other, it creates an edge of just like the folks out there who haven't been part of our discussions and conversations don't have the knowledge we have. If they are interested, they can come in and join us. But through learning, talking about e-learning, it's sort of a movement forward together, right? You're sort of bringing somebody with you to your level of understanding or towards your level of understanding. So I'm just wondering if that I don't want to say imbalance, but if that sort of movement could be the basis for some kind of, I mean, I think I think the third thing that's missing from this little ramble that I've just done is the idea of like a purpose, right? Like there's an interest, but then there's an interest towards a purpose. If you map that overlay that also with knowledge, now you're starting to get a movement where there's value in the knowledge that this person over here has. And maybe you could have some kind of, and if we have a purpose and a desire to fulfill this purpose, now we start to have all the pieces I haven't put this fully together, as you can tell, but now I feel like we have the sort of the makings of a set of feed forward loops that could be quantified into some kind of working system. I hope that made sense to some folks.
That actually makes sense, and we're kind of heading towards. I would like to give us sort of ample time to sort of do a checkout. I mentioned key takeaways and all that, and all programs. Right? So what I would like to pursue further in terms of the game design angle is, what if we do this as one possible sort of meta game inside? If we launch the conversation community as kind of a digital place, digital platform, but what if the digital format might be the one that is actually of most benefit to people? And then we could just place and platform around it, sort of create some kind of structure that people can join and relate to and establish kind of like homestead, right? So the kind of metaphors work for them. So the first level would kind of roughly correspond to kind of like School of Hard Knocks, and everyone for themselves, and negotiated self-interest and all that. And that first level is kind of like paid back. It's a finite game. You go there, what's in it for me, and you find a couple of others, and you're happy, right? You don't want to do anything more. You're just a small group, a sort of band of brothers, so to speak, and you really don't care about the whole thing. You want to just find your own little small corner of this big platform. That's it, right? So that's fine. It's kind of level one in the game. And then you can level up to pay it forward. Then you start to sort of move away a bit from your finite game, which you have sort of absolute control over, and you have known outcomes, into kind of more like, but still, that would just give you kind of move from kind of a small social graph to possibly shared interest graph. It's still not kind of quite enough, right? And then you move up to the third level. I sometimes used to call that, because people usually ask me, John, what the hell are you on about? It's a very common question I get, right? So the third thing could basically just be kind of encapsulated in generativity lifts all boats, right? So that's kind of almost a possible operating principle on how to apply the idea of mutual credit once people actually sign on to it, right? So having then a game design would then make it so the algorithm underneath starts to serve us. So if we operate from a paid back, finite, bartering thing, sure, we will get rewarded, but not much, right? But maybe that's cool for those who just don't want to care about kind of the finer ramifications and sort of go wild in whatever graphs we build. The second level is obviously much better, right? And those people will be more popular because they're paying it forward. And then the third level might possibly be something that is kind of like super users, right? But those would not be super users because they are kind of like names, like Douglas Rushkoff or Nora Bateson, or kind of like those who kind of you swoon in their general presence. But rather the third level would be those who are kind of just by peer-to-peer processes are commonly accepted as, yeah, if things aren't really working the way we want to inside the platform, then let's go ask Milo or Joe or Michael, because they know a thing or two how to sort of, they could tell us, right? So then suddenly knowledge becomes a trim tab. Now, my main takeaway is actually two simple questions. Those are from Milo. So my main takeaway from this session is two questions, which would lend themselves eminently to further Zoom sessions in their own right?
Hey,
So,
I have to drop off, so
sure.
before you ask those questions, I'll just go ahead and do that. And I'm looking forward to watching the rest of the conversation on video.
Oh,
Joe, before you go, did you get the chat? The links in the chat?
Yes. Open money. Yes.
And Jordan Greenhall's work. We should talk about this stuff later.
I'll add them in the annotations and the general chat later on as well. Right? Yeah.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Bye, Joe.
Great conversation, guys. Take care.
See you soon. The questions. So, which could lend themselves to be their own Zoom sessions. The first one from Milo is, where is currency falling short? I just love that question. Right? And the second question is, that obviously also works, almost kind of like a knowledge trim tab to the first question, is where could knowledge take us further? So, and those are metaphors that also work for people, because where is currency falling short? That's something that almost everyone can relate to, right?
Yeah.
Is there too much month left by the end of the wallet, right? I mean, everyone has possibly, well, not the oligarchs, they have not experienced that, but most normal, ordinary people have sometimes experienced that. So it's kind of a relatable question. But the knowledge could take us further. It's also kind of weaving that kind of, okay, so if we get shared understanding and knowledge around mutual credit, for instance, where to? Right? Where do we want to take that idea? Right? So it's kind of one of those, right? So I will add those as annotations as well to the Zoom, and pester every one of the 150 in the large chat thread with those and see where it goes. Right?
Can I, at this point, then reference those links that I just put in our chat? One's a YouTube link to Jordan Greenhall's personal channel, his broadcast channel, which in the February, March, April period, he put up about 24 short 10-minute videos, 10, 15-minute videos, which are quite extraordinary package. It's very much recommended. The link I've given is to the second of those, where he dealt specifically with the distinction between rivalrous and unrivalrous or anti-rivalrous goods. A rivalrous good is something that we can't share. You know, you've got it or I've got it. And an anti-rivalrous good is something that we can share. I give you the information, I've still got it, you've still got it. The difficulty seems to be around monies and currencies, that we're so addicted to ownership, egocentricity, having it, to the fear of losing things, that we get mixed up between rivalrous and anti-rivalrous very easily. And indeed, in his 24 videos, that seems to be the only unclosed loop. He's got everything else beautifully done, in my view. Yeah. Lovely work. But he keeps not quite able to close on what is an anti-rivalrous money. Because we know the rivalrous money. I give you the dollar, you've got it, I don't. Hey, what is the nature of an anti-rivalrous money? And he fails in the DAO, in my view, to effectively find a way to be anti-rivalrous in money. So he keeps re-importing, as we do, old models into a new context. The second link I put up is to a game, Let's Play, that we devised 30 years ago to take people through the distinctions between a money which is competitive and a money which is collaborative. As a simple, it's like a crazy golf game, you know, like nobody plays crazy golf to get better at it, you know. Like you're just there to go through it and keep the kids 20 minutes or something. And the Let's Play game is like that. It's the Monopoly game. You probably know Monopoly was originally devised as a game to prove that property ownership was going to kill us all. It's a long history about that. Henry George in the 1890s, his world was about the problems of private ownership of key property and how that created a power struggle. And he wrote a game, or one of his people wrote a game, which gradually morphed into Monopoly and became the game that has patterned the minds of several generations.
Yeah.
We need to have patterns of possibility that are not in that framework. And that's what the Let's Play game was designed to show. That one form of money is distributive, competitive, commodity, non-divisible. It's hard stuff, and it works. It works very well. Conventional money really works. That is, if anything, the problem.
Yeah.
What we need is soft money that works in a different way, that connects us in collaborative, contributory, convivial ways. So there's another extended little rant. The distinction.
Those are great.
Monies.
Famous last words to you then, Milo, so we can wrap this up.
Yeah, well, there's definitely a lot of things that have gone on today that are making me think more about, like, it's expanding this whole concept of, where's currency falling short. I think one of the things is value. I think we need to look at value because I think what's going on is that we're realizing that there's more value to be had if we do things differently, if we change currency in different ways, if we share knowledge in different ways, we can increase the value. I think there are some downsides to currency. I think part of the problem is, like, for example, like cures and medicines that are not getting to the right people at the right time because of this problem we're having with currency. I'm not going to give it to you because you can't afford to pay for it. Therefore, you don't get the value. And in just as a society as a whole, we're losing in transaction. So we need to see how we can expand currency and knowledge, maybe merging them together in some way, so we can have things that are needed that should be shared, and other things that are not so needed that may not necessarily need to be shared. We need the best of both worlds.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's a really good note to close on. And thanks for your time. And I mean, these were almost too many nuggets and takeaways to mention them all. But I will do my curator best and add stuff. And feel free to also you add stuff. And so big thanks. I'm just pressing the stop in the recording.